Unless you've been living under a rock for the last month, you've probably heard that the Trump tariffs were struck down by the Supreme Court. First thing, not all of the tariffs were struck down. Only the IEEPA tariffs were struck down. Second thing, you may have heard that as a result of the tariffs getting struck down, you're going to get a check from all the tax that you overpaid on the inflated prices of goods. That might not be true. Third thing, you might have heard that prices of goods are going to come down. That's probably true, but I want to moderate your expectations a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about what the decision actually said and what the consequences are likely to be. Number one, not all of the tariffs were struck down. The Supreme Court's decision had to do with the specific tariffs that were justified by the IEEPA, or the International Economic Emergency Powers Act. That's an act that said if there is an economic emergency declared by the president, you can embargo or regulate the trade with certain countries. The Trump administration's position was, well, if I can prohibit trade with a certain country, that means I can also tax trade with that country. The Supreme Court said, no, that's not what Congress said. Congress said that if you declare an emergency, you can prohibit it or you can not, and you can't take the intermediate step. And to some extent, that makes sense, right? That if it's an emergency, then you go straight to 10. And if it's not, then you have to go ask Congress because Congress has the taxing power. Now, the decision's a little bit more complicated than that. If you're interested in a deep dive on that, we can do a video in the future. But for now, that's the broad strokes of the decision. It was a 6-3 decision of the Supreme Court. Second thing, you might have heard, there's been a rumor going around that everybody's going to get their money back of all the costs that they overpaid for lumber and iPhones and avocados and everything else that had these tariffs slapped on them, that you're going to get that money back. That's not true because you didn't pay the tariffs directly. Yes, you paid an increased price because of the tariffs, but you didn't pay the tariffs. The importer paid the tariffs. That means if you're an importer of goods, if you're the one who was actually paying the tariffs because you were bringing in the goods from Mexico or China or Canada or Spain or wherever it was, you get to go get a refund. And if you're one of those people, you need to call a customs lawyer and sue the government yesterday. On the other hand, if you're just an ordinary American consumer, what happened as a result of the tariffs is the importer paid an increased cost. Then they, in order to recoup that cost, they passed that cost along to you in the form of an increased price. You paid the price to the importer. The importer gets a windfall from the US government, but you as the consumer unfortunately don't. So that's the bad news. There's another bit of maybe good news, and that's the third point here. Are prices going to come down as a result of this? Probably. Now, in most cases, the tariffs that were imposed by the IEEPA were massive, and you remember that stupid billboard that Trump had where it had 500,000% tariffs or whatever it was. Those are going to come down because there are other tariffs that he can impose, namely the Section 122 tariffs that allow him to tariff up to 15% for 5 months without the approval of Congress. Those are going to go away in 5 months if Congress doesn't say yes, number one. Number two, it's capped at 15%. He can't do the 500,000 million% because somebody said something mean on Twitter tariffs that he had before. That means that for most goods that were subject to the IEEPA tariffs, those prices are likely to come down at the checkout line. However, not all of the goods that were tariffed are subject to those IEEPA tariffs. There are other baskets of tariffs that were not ruled unconstitutional by this ruling. For example, national security tariffs, meaning if you're an automaker, you're making steel widgets, things that might be used to make tanks or airplanes or battleships or whatever, those are going to stay in place most likely because of national security interests. That's going to be litigated because does a piece of wooden furniture really apply to national security? Questionable. So there may be some overbroad application attempts of those national security tariffs, but for a lot of those things, prices on cars probably not going to drop as a result of this Supreme Court ruling because those national security tariffs are going to stay in place. So like I said, we'll be quick. If you're an American consumer, this is good news. Maybe not as good of news as you had hoped for because you're not going to get a check from all the taxes that you paid on these items, but it's good news because prices are probably going to come down a little bit. If you're the owner of an importing company, this is fantastic news for you, and you need to contact a customs attorney and sue the federal government yesterday. If you're the shareholder of an importing company, this is also pretty good news for you because that stock price is likely to go up. If you're President Trump, this is probably bad news for you. And my personal little prediction, we're just going to put a pin in it here. If you're Iran, this is probably also bad news for you because somebody needs to reassert presidential power and we might go start a war in the Middle East. We'll see. Anyway, if you're enjoying the content, like and subscribe. We'll see y'all next time.